This is To See Each Other, where we explore how people are fighting for the future of rural America and how writing it off hurts us all. I'm George Gale. I'm a longtime community organizer and lifelong Midwesterner. And in this season of To See Each Other, we're heading to one of my favorite places, Wisconsin, to get to know a group of small-town seniors fighting for the dignity of the elderly and a better future for us all. Organizing is hard in the best of conditions, but these are not the best of conditions. A push across many rural counties to close down or privatize non-mandated county programs. It's a super common strategy for people in power to shut down debate, to delay, deceive, and deny, which is exactly what we're seeing in Lincoln County. Still, in the summer of 2023, people for Pine Crest are fighting tooth and nail, more than willing to afflict the comfortable, and they're hitting a brick wall. Dora Gorski remembers what it felt like facing the board's silence.
The people for Pine Crest would get together and what do we need to say? And then we'd put together these ideas and people would bring their own speeches and from their own hearts.
Number 8, public comment. Dora Gorski, you wanted to speak?
And we'd go up there and we'd speak.
My item is the budget, and I just heard it from the budget that we have.
They would just look at us, and you knew they were being polite, but they weren't hearing a thing we would say.
All right, thank you, Dora. Next is Judy Waller.
And they would say to us directly, well, we don't have to speak to anything. We don't have to answer any of your questions. You're just giving public comment.
Just like to let county board members know that we certainly aren't going to engage or start a rolling conversation on items that are not on the agenda.
We hear you, and now we'll go back to business. And then they'd sit there and they'd have their discussions. And we had a few people on the board that would speak to our points. But mostly, you knew they had an agenda.
And that agenda? Well, it seemed to us the board didn't believe that care is the role of the government. If the government isn't legally bound to do it, they didn't feel like they should. It was part of a larger effort to dismantle as many non-mandated county programs as possible. First 4-H, then the Agricultural Extension, then the Disability Center, and now Pine Crest. An ideological position if there ever was one.
The main goal of the Board of Supervisors, in my opinion, is to serve the community, to figure out what the community needs, to take what needs to be done that cannot be paid for by yourself. You can't pay for the road to get to your work. You can't pay for the fire department to be able to come and save your house. You have to put your money together and then out of the funds together pay for all these extra things. That's what government is about. And that's what the history of Wisconsin is about. And Minnesota, we were farm communities. We got together. Not everybody had a combine. So, you got together and you combined this guy's fields and the wives got together and they fixed food. That's our history. When people had a fire, the community got together and everybody bailed water out of the stream and carried buckets. And that's what community, that's what government is.
The argument they were making to the people, however, was different. Members of the board continued to insinuate that Pine Crest was too expensive for the county to run.
We have been losing an average of $1.1 million a year since 2016. We've been losing money since 2007.
Lincoln County has needs totaling tens of millions of dollars for mandatory functions that take precedence over discretionary Pine Crest spending.
We are sitting on in ascending expenditure requirements and no additional population or revenue.
We saw the capital improvement budget tonight. It's negative in 2 years. There are no more pockets of money left anywhere to fill these holes.
But the financial picture seemed intentionally murky. A big part of the confusion about Pine Crest financials was the lack of clarity around the relatively concrete day-to-day costs. This as opposed to differing points of view on debt payments and large capital improvements like a new roof or HVAC system. There was a lot of wiggle room for estimates to be all over the place. A report from the county issued in early 2023 estimated that Pine Crest had a $1.2 million deficit the previous year. It also shouldered debt payments from a large 2017 addition to the facility. And the report estimated $8 million in maintenance and capital improvements over the next 5 to 10 years. a dollar figure many folks in the community thought was suspect. There were many factors to consider in understanding Pinecrest's financial health. There were questions about federal Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements, questions about county taxes, questions about contributions from the State Department of Health. But to people for Pinecrest, there weren't a lot of answers to their questions. One thing was clear. The people wanted to support Pinecrest. So they came out in droves to support a referendum that would ask the public if they supported raising their taxes to pay for Pinecrest. And that vote would be binding. Remember, Lincoln County's tax dollars were already supporting Pinecrest, which was part of the community's feeling of ownership. So if the board's argument was financial, could the community pay more for it themselves? Mike McMahon, the organizer on our team supporting People for Pinecrest, remembers how frustrating it was sitting in those meetings about the potential referendum.
In August 2023, there was a resolution brought to bring a referendum to the people of Lincoln County on whether to increase the levy to pay for Pinecrest long term. It was a packed room. There were people sitting on the floor, people standing in the hall. Every seat was full. Signs, lots of testimony. Almost all of it in favor of holding a referendum on it. People wanted the right to vote. And then the board went into deliberations around it. And coming out of that meeting, one of the people in attendance said, they're throwing numbers around like confetti. And what she was referring to was the initial referendum was for $3 million a year. But then they said, oh, what about this? I mean, they were just tossing numbers around with any sort of backup evaluation about it.
The resolution says operations, maintenance, I'd have to see the exact wording, but
What is the magic number? I mean, Ken said 4.5.
I think the 3 million would cover it.
No, I see her shaking her head back there, but
4.5 is the number we need.
Remember, we're talking 10 years.
Does that include paying off the debt service? That's my question.
It could and it could not. That's my answer. If 1 year...
The way the board was tossing around numbers and refusing to be accountable to them had Judy Waller, well, it had everyone pissed off.
Those 22 people on that county board, at the time, there was no one that had expertise in anything about a building, let alone running a nursing home. We had 4 different answers of how much the referendum should be. And then one even said, well, I really am not very good with math.
I'm not good at math, so I would welcome anyone to check these numbers. It appears that in 2014, we spent $78,000.
And I'm thinking,
expenditures were
and why are you even speaking? You know, have your facts.
They wound up with a big number of 4.5 million as that's what we need every year. And people who had been studying and looking at this and cared deeply about the nursing home were like, we don't, baloney. That's not what's needed here, and saw it as a poison pill attempt to scare people off of this. That board voted against holding a referendum at all. But the idea that people didn't have a right to vote on something as important as the nursing home, that was another sort of energizing. And so people who weren't necessarily paying attention were now paying a lot more attention.
The referendum went down by a 13-9 vote. Not unanimous by any stretch, but still a strong sign of where the county board stood on the issue.
So at one point, Gene Bevel at a meeting after the referendum was lost. That was a hard meeting. And Gene said, look, people right now are scared. People in Pinecrest right now are scared, and they're looking to us to figure this out. So win or lose on the sale of Pinecrest, I'm asking folks, are we going to see this all the way through? And people were like, yeah, we're going to see this through.
On one of my visits to Merrill, I spoke to Gene Bevel about People for Pinecrest's perseverance.
we knew this thing was going to get dragged out. We knew the government can afford to wait us out, just kind of let things roll for 6 months, 8 months, a year, and people just slowly drift away. It's not happened here. It's commitment, it's passion, and it's the idea that people feel Pine Crest is something very personal to them, and they're willing to do what it takes. That's kind of what football coaches like to preach, if you probably hear them. But it's not very often that you see a bunch of elderly women in particular who are, they're willing to go the whole route. These people are tough.
The members of People for Pine Crest were definitely tough. And the more the board deflected, the more motivated people became to save Pine Crest. Here's Mike again.
When people have been taught this is how government should work, we should be able to come and petition our local government. They should listen and respond in a way that is reasonable. And then this is the way it actually works in reality. It is a violation of what they believe around democracy. And so that ignites people a bit. So there you get a little bit of fire and pop and anger that allows them to pursue democracy even more.
That pursuit can come in many forms. Dora Gorski and Judy Wallard decided it's time to get creative and how to keep the sale of Pine Crest top of mind for people in Lincoln County.
Well, Mike said it's important that we stay in front of people's faces, that we keep who we are in the public eye. What can we do? Oh, well, there's a parade, And so Judy says, I know how to get us in it.
I said, we're going to have a float, and we're going to have signs.
And so then I thought about a theme and...
Well, we got to have T-shirts because we're going to march. So I went and I bought a whole bunch of T-shirts, different sizes, and I sold them for $10 a piece, which was just about what I paid for them. And I found a Grinch costume for a whole person, and I squished Paul into it.
And between adjusting it and people having different ideas, we came up with quite a fun situation.
We went in the parade and we put signs out in the parade. And, and nobody, the things that were just in people's face, shocking them. So, the word gets out.
The people along the parade route, they were clapping and cheering and laughing. We had a good time.
All the people that were happy that we were working on Pine Crest. Things like that gave you encouragement to keep working at it. I think we had one or two people that were negative and said, don't bother or something like that. But the majority of the people were really enthused. They wanted to have Pine Crest here. It wasn't just our idea. It was the community's idea.
Meanwhile, the local media picked up on the debate about Pine Crest, running polls about the future of the nursing home. The results of the polls in the fall of 2023 were surprising.
The Photo News and the Tomahawk Leader ran a survey in October. The key question in that survey was, would you support an increase in your property taxes for 5 years or more to keep the nursing home county-owned? So we waited for the results, and this is a fairly conservative county, and taxes and tax levies are something that our people pay a lot of attention to. So we were more than surprised when it came back that 85% of the respondents, and I think there were 782 of them, 85% said, we support increasing our property taxes to keep the nursing home county-owned. I don't think 85% of people like chocolate ice cream. That is a huge percentage of people that just say, yes, this is what we want. Yet again, this board continued to pursue a sale at that time.
People for Pine Crest also went to the media themselves. Their fight made it all the way to Time magazine, including in a piece about caregiving as one of the defining issues of the 2024 election. Locally, before the Merrill Photo News ran their poll, Dora Gorski published an op-ed in the Wisconsin State Journal, one of the most read papers in the state. Her husband, Ken, who had been an EMT and was a respected member of the community, suffered from dementia at the end of his life. Dora, meanwhile, struggled with the weight of caregiving for him. a struggle relatable to millions of Americans, including me. Right now, I'm scrambling to put together the care my mom needs. While we are recording this, I'm texting caregivers, stepping out to call assisted living facilities, and working with her friends to make sure she is taking the right meds. That wait and worry lifted considerably for Dora when they found their way to Pine Crest, the kind of place I wish I could find for my mom. Dora shared her and Ken's story when we visited her at her home, where she welcomed us with a slice of peach praline pie and whipped cream.
You have somebody that has dementia, you don't plan on that. And you don't think about how you're going to live the rest of your life, how you're going to manage your own finances if your partner is going to be gone and you're going to lose his income. And then how was I going to care for him? And over time, it just became more and more difficult. You know, he couldn't help me around the farm anymore, and I had to do the work. And then as people grow into that dementia, they stop being able to relate to you. They don't hear what you say. He was always a very sensitive person. You know, if I felt sad, I knew he would know. He didn't know. You just slowly lose your partner. You lose the person that you love. They turn from being somebody you just love being with, that is your helpmate and your source of joy, to being a child that you have to take care of. And sometimes you resent it. You know, it's the truth. But they're still the person you love, and you know who they are, and you respect them, and they deserve it. But it's very hard. When you're a caregiver, it's a lonely job. I was in tears. I talked to the social worker. What am I going to do? You know, I can't pick him up if he falls. I can't carry him. He can't walk. Well, you're going to have to figure it out. I don't even have a wheelchair. You know, how am I going to get him in the house? There's 4 steps to get him into the house. And she said, well, at St. Stephen's Church, they have a lending arrangement for people to get a wheelchair. I'll call them up. She should call them up, and they had a wheelchair, so I went in there, and I was in tears, and it was Reverend Southcole. He listened to my story, and he was incredible. And got the wheelchair, put it in the car, and then I got home and I had called the first responder people to see if I could get somebody to help me get him in the house. And the guy who bought our farm, he was there too, and he helped. There was 4 of us that got him in the house, and then the visiting nurse came. And she said, this is too dangerous. You cannot manage him yourself. You're going to hurt him and you're going to hurt yourself. And this is just not allowed. They called Pine Crest, and the woman in charge of admittance just happens to be the wife of one of the deputies that Ken has trained as an EMT. In fact, her 3 children I had in my classes as students, Aikido students. And she pulled whatever, I don't know. In 3 days, he was admitted into Pine Crest. How many people have a facility that has neighbors in there that will help their neighbors and know the people and care enough about the people to do what they need to do to get people into care? We got there, and I was walking down the hall one day, and this woman was ahead of me, and then she kind of slowed down, and she said, oh, do you know that Ken is my father and my uncle's best friend? They're Don and Dean Mueller, and Dean played music at our wedding. It was a piano player at our wedding, and she was on some of the administration at Pine Crest. So then we not only had Amy, but we had her to help watch over Ken. And one day we were sitting there, and some woman came in and sat down with us. I was sitting with Ken at breakfast, and she said, I used to work with Ken when he was a phlebotomist. And there were people that were, had known Ken as an instructor, as an EMT, as all these things that he had done. He wasn't a doddering old fool. He was a man to be respected and loved and cared for. And so, it was a great place for him. And you wouldn't find that in some for-profit place. This is part of the community. Pine Crest is our nursing home. It's our family. It's our neighbors. It just means so much to us.
Ken died in December 2023 after spending 8 months at Pine Crest. Since then, Dora has remained one of People for Pine Crest's strongest leaders, organizing her community with perseverance, righteous anger, and so much joy despite her profound loss. I'm humbled by this organizing, the vigorous resistance mounted by senior citizens and the fight for what's right, not just for themselves, but to provide care for their community and protect care for the generations that follow them. The fight to protect these county-owned nursing homes, led by nursing home residents and families of residents themselves, goes against every mean-spirited, belittling stereotype of the elderly that has dominated our cultural and political conversation of the past year. Who is fit to lead? Are old people out of touch? Who can we trust to make good decisions for our future? Our ageism and our inability to confront aging head-on, both its benefits and its hardships, has misled us and robbed our elders of the dignity they deserve. We're lucky if we get to age, and if we get to age into wisdom. I feel grateful to learn from People for Pine Crest and for leaders like Dora whose grace and fire are an inspiration. Next week on To See Each Other, People for Pine Crest are at the edge of an organizing breakthrough, rewriting the rules of engagement in their fight for justice. People for Pine Crest has decided they've attended enough meetings run by the county board. They're going to organize their own big meeting, a town hall meeting that they control. They also start digging even further into the financials, practicing the organizing rule of always follow the money. And People for Pine Crest learn a private buyer has made an offer to buy Pine Crest, but no one has access to concrete information because the board is operating behind closed doors. Follow To See Each Other wherever you listen to podcasts and share with all your people. Visit toseeeachother.org to learn more about this fight. To See Each Other is a project of Edition and the Mashup Americans. It is executive produced by Amy S. Choi and Rebecca Lair of the Mashup Americans and George Gale of Edition. Senior editor is Sarah Pellegrini. Story consultant is Jeff Seelbach. Lead researcher is Melissa Lowe. Production managers are Shelby Sandlin and Andy Harris. Sound designer is Pedro Rafael Rosado. Original music composed by the Brothers Tang. Special thanks to Jen Carrillo and Mike McMahon of Edition.